Hi! In this lesson we are going to create our database tables. We can use phpMyAdmin for that, but Laraval provides something more flexible. Let's open up the routes.php file and let's start writing some code. We are going to use the default Laravel route for that. So we'll add the code to the closure for the default route. In order to create the structure of the table, we start by using the Laravel's schema class. A schema is a way to logically group objects such as tables, views, stored procedures, and so on. Next, we are going to call the create function of the schema class. Create is also a static function, so we'll use again the two colons to separate the class from the function. Then we insert the name of the table that we want to create between the single quotes. We want to create a table called books in this case. Next, there is the closure, which takes one parameter, a variable used to reference our table. We'll call it new table. We can now declare the fields of the table by using the new table variable. Let's start with an auto-increment field. In Laravel, this can be done by using the increments function while passing the name of the field that we want to be created, which usually is ID. We end the line with a semicolon, as usual. Next, in our book table, we want to be able to store the name of the writer of the book. We begin again with the new table variable, but this time calling the string function with the name of the field, which is writer in this case. Next field we want to hold our book title, which is also a string, but this time we want our string to be able to store up to 500 characters, and we specify that by adding 500 in the same parentheses as the field name, delimited by comma. By not specifying any length for the field that we declare, Laravel will use the default value of 255 characters. Next, we want to be able to specify a description for the book, which will be of type text. The next field will hold a date and will be published date for the book. Then we add an integer that will hold the number of copies available for that book. And we finish our schema with a timestamps function, which is Laravel specific. This function will actually add two columns. One that will hold the date the record was added to the database, and the second one that will keep track of the date that the record has been modified. We'll get into more details about these fields soon. Now that we finished declaring our table schema, let's save the file and we'll refresh the page so the code inside the route will be executed. I'll just press enter to reload the page and no errors. Great! Let's see if the code has been successfully executed. We can check that by opening the phpMyAdmin again and we'll refresh the page. As you can see, a new table called books has been created. By opening the table, we can see that it contains no data. Let's see its structure. We can see that the ID field is set to auto-increment as we specified. Next, there is the writer column, which is a varchar. As we didn't specify any length when we created it, this will take the default value, which is 255 characters. Then there is the title, which will hold up to 500 characters, followed by description, which is a text, and by published, which has the date type, and then the number of copies, which we declare it as an integer, and finishing with the two columns created by the timestamps function, which are created at and updated at, both of type timestamp. These two fields will be automatically updated when we insert or modify a record in the database. So far so good, but let's say that we later decide to include another column in the table structure, and we also realize that we don't need that copies column, so we are going to remove it. How can we achieve that? Very simple. I will just comment these lines of code as the table is already created, and will write the necessary code to accomplish the task I want. We'll start again by calling the schema class, but this time we will not use the create function, as the table is already created. We will use the table function. This function will allow us to alter or modify the table structure. Let's first add a new Boolean column called in-store, which will keep track of the availability of the book in the store, and we decided to remove the copies column as we'll not need it anymore. Please note that we used the drop column function to delete a column of the table structure, and we specified the name of the column to be deleted, which in our case is copies. Right now the copies column is still present in our table, but let's refresh the page and see what's happening. Okay, the page has been successfully refreshed without errors, so let's get back to phpMyAdmin and see the table structure now. I'll just refresh the page and voila, the copies column is now gone, and we have a new column called in-store of type tinyInt, which is also synonym to Boolean. Isn't this a nice way to interact with your database by writing code instead of actually creating tables? But we didn't get to the best part yet. That will come in the next lesson, called migrations.